Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today at the Lytham Partners Spring 2022 Investor Conference. My name is Adam Lowensteiner, Vice President of Lytham Partners. During this fireside chat today, we welcome Lisa Crossley of Reliq Health Technologies, ticker symbol RHT, that is Robert Harry Thomas on the Toronto Venture Exchange, and RQHTF, that is Robert Quebec Harry Thomas Frank in the US. Before we begin, for those not familiar with Lytham Partners, is one of the country's leading investor relations firms with more than 2 decades of corporate access experience. We've built one of the industry's most diverse and effective platforms for connecting small cap companies with high quality and focused institutional investors, while creating a framework of best practices in all aspects of investor relations. Today's discussion is hopefully yet another example where we can bring value to multiple constituents. We will dive into the discussion in a moment, but one final item, I want to remind everyone that Reliq is available for one-on-one meetings later this week. If you have not already signed up, please send me an email at lowensteiner@lythampartners.com or visit www.lythampartners.com/virtual and click the one-on-one meeting request button. With that said, let's begin. So Lisa, welcome. Let's start with you providing a little brief overview of Reliq and your background.
Having us. So Reliq Health is a software as a service company. We are focused on the healthcare technology space. Our target market is primarily the United States, where we're very focused on the chronic disease patient population who are covered by Medicare and Medicaid. So our total addressable market in the States currently, and it grows every year, is close to 60 million patients. And our software as a service is specifically designed to improve health outcomes for this patient population and to reduce hospitalizations and therefore healthcare costs. My background, this is the 4th company that I've run as CEO, the first publicly traded company, although I started my career in Boston with a company that we took public in the summer of 2000, had a highly successful IPO, and ultimately sold the company and took it private again by selling it to Shire for $6 billion. So I've spent about 18 years running companies, and I'm very, very passionate about Reliq because I think it's one of those rare companies that gives you the opportunity to do very well as an investor and as a member of the management team, but also to really do some good.
Great. Sometimes it's good and helpful to look backwards a little bit. What are some of the key accomplishments that Reliq achieved last year in 2021 that you're proud of and are important for investors to know of?
Yeah, I think as a healthcare company, just surviving the pandemic is kind of a big deal. Certainly last year was very exciting for us in the second half of the year. In the 4th quarter of the calendar year, so quarter ending December 31st, 2021, we increased revenue compared to the previous entire fiscal year by at least 200%. So it was a really significant growth phase for us, that second 6 months of 2021. And I think that very much set the stage for 2022. So we really got a lot of new clients, a lot of pull from the market once the vaccine rollout really got underway, and physicians and home health agencies were able to shift away from focusing on acute care for really critically ill COVID patients to getting back to more proactive preventative care for chronic disease patients. And some other key events that happened in 2021, Medicare and Medicaid increased the scope of their programs, so increased the number of eligible patients for programs that include virtual care, but also significantly increased reimbursement. So there have been a lot of kind of tailwinds in the industry since the middle of 2021 that have really driven adoption of our platform and really created a significant market pull for Reliq's technologies.
How has the industry changed over the past few years? Can you please discuss why insurance reimbursements for home patient monitoring have increased 5-fold in the past few years?
It's changed dramatically. When we started in 2018, late 2017, working with patients, Medicare had just introduced in January 2018 the first billing code for remote patient monitoring. Prior to that, those programs were only offered through Medicaid at the state level and very variable whether a given state would offer it, and really a very narrow focus on high blood pressure and diabetes patients. And since Medicare introduced that first billing code, which took a little while to kind of iron out the kinks, but since 2018, they've increased the size of the reimbursement from an average of $59 per patient per month that is paid to the clinician when they use Reliq's platform to deliver virtual care services, to now our typical physicians are receiving around $400 per patient per month in new revenue when they roll out our platform and start to deliver virtual care services to patients. And in addition, the scope of the programs have really expanded. So as I said, there was one billing code introduced by Medicare in 2018. There are now 23 different billing codes that Reliq's platform helps clinicians leverage to deliver virtual care to quite a broad range of patients. So whether that's your typical chronic disease patients who have diabetes, congestive heart failure, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and high blood pressure, diabetes, but it also includes patients who have musculoskeletal issues. So that could be osteoarthritis or even an injury or recovering from orthopedic surgery. And it includes a broad range of respiratory issues that were just recently covered beginning January 1st, 2022. So things like asthma. And where the program originally only allowed for capturing data through the use of class 2 medical devices. So it was all really hardware driven. Under the new RTM remote therapeutic monitoring codes that were introduced in January of this year, and there is some opportunity for patient self-reported data to be captured so that you're able to really examine more subjective data, but that's still really clinically relevant. So for example, for asthmatics, if they're waking up in the night in order to take their rescue inhaler, that's a really strong predictor of future hospitalizations. So now that data can be entered by the patient through an app or over the phone, whatever works for that particular patient's level of technophileness, whether they like technology or not. And we can work with patients from a broad range of backgrounds. But it's really opened up that chronic care monitoring and management approach that's more proactive and preventive, really opened up that market significantly. And the reason for that change over the last 4 years is that when Medicare and Medicaid did introduce those billing codes and start to see adoption in the market, they immediately noticed that these programs really dramatically reduce hospitalizations for these patients. So they're preventing complications. They're allowing clinicians to intervene early when a patient just needs a change of medication or maybe some respiratory therapy, for example. And it keeps patients out of the intensive care unit. So it saves hundreds of thousands of dollars per patient per year. And as a result, Medicare and Medicaid have continued to really double down every year since 2018, increasing both the reimbursement and the scope of those programs.
So how large is the opportunity here for Reliq? And are you the only player? And how do you differentiate yourself?
I mean, it's a massive opportunity for us. The market's worth well over $100 billion. We have a total addressable market of close to 60 million patients in the US alone. So it's really a huge market. I would also say that, less than 5% of all patients in that target patient population are currently receiving any kind of virtual care. So it's very much an untouched market at this point. And that's really because, the billing codes and everything have only made this an attractive market for companies to enter into in the last few years. And during the pandemic, clinicians were so focused on just acute care for those critically ill COVID patients that there really wasn't much going on in terms of proactive preventative care for chronic disease patients. So that's all changed quite dramatically since about end of June, July last year, 2021. But the trend is certainly towards exponential growth in the number of patients and clinicians who are requesting services like we support through our platform. I think there's incredible room for growth in this market for Reliq. We've established ourselves as the first market and the gold standard in the community care space. The community care market is very unique. There are a lot of complexities to it, but we've been working in it since 2017. So we really do understand the workflows for family doctors, specialists, home health agencies, but we also really understand the constraints they're operating within. So they don't have a big IT department like a hospital would to support the implementation and ongoing maintenance and rollout of a software platform. So we had to design something that was really truly intuitive, a very lightweight software as a service layer that would live in the cloud, so they wouldn't have to have their own dedicated servers and firewalls. And we designed a program that was really specifically for these chronic disease patients who aren't very interested in technology. Most Medicare patients, obviously Medicare is a program for patients 65 and up. So most of the patients that we have on the platform are in their 70s or are older. They tend to live in remote and rural communities, although they can also be in heavily populated, high population density urban centers. But they tend not to be particularly technology focused or particularly comfortable with technology. So asking those elderly sick patients to use an app on a tablet or an app on their phone, which they may not even have. A lot of them live in communities where there's no conventional internet access, or they don't have internet access in their own homes. So we really designed a platform that we can connect to devices over the cellular network. The patient does not have to learn how to use an app or a tablet or a computer. It's all done through the device, all of the sort of direct communication reminders to take medication or to collect your vital signs. And as soon as the patient, say, steps on a scale or blows into a spirometer, that data is automatically pushed to our cloud, where we use it to automatically alert clinicians if that patient has an out of norm result. So we've really designed a patient experience that leads to these very high levels of adherence that traditionally in this space have been very hard to achieve with this challenging patient population. So I think we've got a very good position in the market as having established ourselves in the community care space as the gold standard. And we have now 4 years of clinical data demonstrating efficacy of our platform in reducing hospitalizations by over 80% and therefore saving the healthcare system. I mean, just literally ultimately at full deployment of virtual care systems, Medicare expects to save hundreds of billions of dollars a year by preventing these relatively unnecessary hospitalizations. So we've got that clinical data that backs that up, but we also have the reimbursement data from Medicare and Medicaid showing that our clinicians are receiving this new revenue. So it's a very compelling and sustainable competitive advantage in this space.
So by communicating with the hardware, if the patient doesn't use the hardware, you can pick up on that and you can set alarms, or how does that adherence work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so adherence, depending on the program they're using, there are certain adherence thresholds they have to reach. So they might have to collect their vital signs, 16 out of every 30 days, or the bar may be set even a little bit higher. And so, we traditionally, when we started out and really until halfway through 2021, we were working primarily with Medicaid patients and in Texas, where Medicaid patients are the responsibility or the purview of home health agencies. So the advantage of working with a home health agency is that their model is very high touch. So they will call the patient every single day and remind them to collect their results. So as we've moved into the Medicare arena to try to improve adherence in the early months when patients are just getting the hang of things, we've introduced some more automated calling with our interactive voice recognition platform that allows us to deliver reminders to those patients. And we do recognize that particularly in this older population, it takes about 2 months for something to become a habit. So, we aren't necessarily harassing or nagging too much in those first 2 months, but we generally do find that by the 3rd month, we've got over 98% adherence by the end of that 3rd month with our patient population. So it really is just a question of getting the patient comfortable with this new routine so that it becomes really consistent and kind of second nature to get up in the morning and take your medication as prescribed and to collect your vital signs. We work to support adherence. And that's something that will always be, focusing on what ways can we improve that establishment of that routine. So how can we get the patients comfortable and consistent more quickly? But generally right now, patients are fully adherent and very consistent within 2 to 3 months of being on the platform. And that's very significant in this space where generally adherence drops off over time. And we see the opposite. Once patients are comfortable, and then we're able to get 98% adherence, whereas with conventional systems, apps and tablets, you're looking at less than 20% adherence after 2 weeks, and it just goes down from there.
I get this question a lot from investors. What's the selling process for iUGO? How long is the sales cycle, and how quickly can you get practices on the platform? And how's that sales pipeline look for the company?
Yeah, so I mean, we have historically sold mostly to home health agencies and individual physician practices. We've now kind of graduated to a larger scale of clients. So if you look at our DataSoft Logic contract that we announced earlier this year, ultimately that's going to give us 500,000 patients on the platform. And there's a big difference between selling to those small and large groups. So when we started out with the small groups, that's really where you prove yourself as a healthcare company and establish your credibility, but also, generate that data around efficacy and reimbursement. And so we were selling directly to those small practices and home health agencies. We're now at a point where we've got enough of a reputation in space that essentially all of our smaller clients come in through referrals. So from existing physician practice and home health agency clients, we get quite a few inbound calls from colleagues, both local to that clinician and in other states, who will say, my colleague has said that this is really helping keeping their patients out of hospital and it's generating significant new revenue for them. So sign me up, and how quickly can I get going? On that smaller end, we are typically able to onboard those clinics within kind of a month or two. It really does depend, onboarding, the pace of onboarding is not really dependent on us. It's very much driven by the clinicians and how quickly they're comfortable moving. But generally with the smaller practices, we're looking at starting kind of within the month that we announce and having all of their patients on within a month or two. We have the ability to onboard everybody in one day if that's what the clinician wanted to do, but generally they have a certain comfort level with moving at a certain pace, and we respect that. The sales process for those smaller clients is quite quick. So we could get a referral and have that patient population, that clinician, onboarded and fully up and running within a matter of weeks at the outside. And typically, the sales process there is at most, 1 or 2 months. When you get into the larger organizations where you're going to have to present before the board, and there'll be certain things you need to do to kind of work through their processes, which are much more established than with smaller groups. And those can take much longer. So some of the larger clients that we've worked with, we've been talking to them for well over a year before we sign them. Now, part of that timeline is due to the pandemic. So, we had a number of larger clients that, like Cognizant and DataSoft Logic, that we had expected we would be able to announce in the last calendar quarter of 2021. But with the Omicron wave, that really is a kind of an acute situation that our healthcare organization clients have to focus on. So, those didn't end up getting signed and announced until the current quarter, until, Q1 calendar of 2022, so last quarter. So it depends a little bit, but I would say that, the larger accounts, while they may take longer to close, we've certainly been doing work with quite a number of those for a significant amount of time. So it's not to say that it's going to take another year before our shareholders are going to get news about another large contract or large healthcare organization. And really having signed and announced our partnership with Cognizant is going to make a huge difference in terms of our ability to reach these larger clients and to close deals with them, because it is essentially in healthcare very much a good housekeeping seal of approval. Cognizant's very, very well known in the healthcare IT space, and they're very well connected into these large healthcare organizations, managed care organizations, and into insurers. So it's we're going to be able to access, these new clients through that partnership, but also even with the new clients that we've been going after on our own, like DataSoft Logic. I think our announcement with Cognizant was really what kind of eventually took that over the finish line, because, there's always concerns in healthcare. It's a very conservative market about smaller companies, but having that endorsement from a multi-billion-dollar multinational that's very well respected in the space really gives us a ton of credibility and reassures those larger clients that we are going to be able to scale to whatever scale they need, and that we're going to be around for the long haul.
That was my next question about Cognizant and how that's progressing. Maybe you could shed a little bit of light on the relationship, and then also like what investors maybe can expect out of the relationship, how quickly things can happen, or what the expectation might be to see some additional relationships open from this new deal.
Yeah, so we work very closely with Cognizant. As you know, they're going to be able to provide care management. We've actually already started providing care management for one of our clients, but they'll be able to provide care management when we get into the really large clients who are going to need to add a lot of care managers very quickly. So having the relationship with them where they are bringing their existing care management resources and their ability to scale that human resource intensive side of the business very quickly. That's a key requirement of some of the managed care organizations and insurers that we're speaking to. So it was really critical to get that put in place. But beyond that, we work very closely with Cognizant. We have weekly meetings with their sales team, and we jointly respond to large RFPs with them. Again, RFPs aren't a super quick process. They're at least several months before you get a decision. But we are out there working with a nationwide and in fact global sales force at Cognizant. We have responded to an RFP in the UK with them, for example. So their sales team is really acting as an extension of ours, which is a wonderful thing because they have a very large and very exceptionally qualified sales team. And I think we bring something very unique to Cognizant. They have this tremendous IT infrastructure, and they've got amazing frameworks. They're really strong in cybersecurity and databases and interfacing with Medicare and Medicaid, interoperability with different electronic medical records. But what we bring that's unique is that remote patient monitoring, behavioral health integration, transitional care management piece that's very clinician and patient focused, as opposed to more, kind of a strictly IT offering. So less in the background, I guess you would say. And we have an exceptional user experience with our platform. So I think it's a really good marriage. We're able to take advantage of their depth on kind of the framework, interoperability and scalability piece, but we bring this really user-friendly and kind of client-facing software platform that gives them something new in their toolkit and something very unique. So I think the partnership ultimately will be of benefit, great benefit to both companies.
Can you discuss possibly the new markets you're developing for the IUGO? There's been several, announcements that include the most recent with CRO and clinical trials. We talk about adherence to the patient and such. I mean, that's a very good fit for CROs is the IUGO. You mentioned hospice. I think you mentioned a few others. How should investors look at each vertical that gets added? I mean, how large can each of these become?
I mean, obviously it depends on the vertical. If we were to go after, some tiny little, disease indication, that would have a much smaller impact than going after something very large. Hospice is really quite large. HIV is quite large, but clinical trials really dwarfs both of those. I think the thing I really want investors to take away from any announcement where we are talking about going into a new vertical is the fact that we specifically designed our platform from the ground up to be extremely flexible and to allow us to make modifications that would let our clients go after these different Medicare billing codes or different market opportunities very quickly. So as soon as a new Medicare billing code arises, or we have a client come to us and say, we want to do this with the platform, we're able to very, very quickly make those changes or optimize the platform to support that. So with clinical trials, for example, that's a vertical where our platform has tremendous value to the pharmaceutical companies because we're allowing them to really systematically, objectively collect data from patients in the home around efficacy, but also side effects, safety. And traditionally in clinical trials, patients are self-reporting data, so they're keeping it in a log. And what you do, having run clinical trials myself, that's where I started my career. what you do to make sure that patients are actually taking the medication and writing things down is you bring them into a clinic every week or 2 weeks, which is very expensive and still doesn't keep them from doing things like sitting in their car in the parking lot, squeezing the inhaler so that, it looks like they've been taking it when they haven't. And so using our platform to track that they're actually consuming the medication, that they're taking it appropriately, and that they are reporting through these medical monitoring devices, we're collecting this vital sign data. That helps pharmaceutical companies get out of the clinic and into the market much faster. And Center Watch, which is kind of a repository for clinical trial and the clinical trial market, says that for every day spent in the clinic instead of in the market, pharmaceutical companies lose between $600,000 and $8 million a day. So for clinical trial contract research organizations to be able to offer a platform that collects this very valuable objective data and that gets trials completed sooner without losing patients to follow up because they don't want to come in to the clinic every week. That's something that's tremendously valuable to the pharmaceutical industry. So I think that's somewhere where we'll see a lot of potential growth going forward.
Do you have access? Do you get to keep the data from the CRO trials on the iUGO platform? I know we mentioned before about other data that's gathered from patients on the iUGO platform, and maybe discuss a little bit about the opportunity with the data for the company in the coming years. Then,
yeah. So we don't generally keep data from the clinical trials, and that's because it's really specific and it's at times related to a drug that's never going to make it to market. So depending on how the clinical trial goes, that drug may not exist. And so that data is really only useful to that one particular pharmaceutical company that's studying that particular medication. So it's not something we could really resell. But we do keep the data from everything else that we do. We keep a copy of all patient data. We anonymize it, de-identify it, and probably sometime next year, we'll kind of hit critical mass where we've got sufficient patient numbers, but also sufficient history. So enough time that we've been following these patients, that data becomes extremely valuable. Again, it's objective data collected directly from these class 2 medical devices. It's not patient self-reported, so it's not subjective and inherently a little bit flawed. This is really high quality data because it is objective. And we're looking at patients in the home who have quite a broad range of different clinical indications or chronic conditions. So where a clinical trial will really generally look at someone who has, cancer, but not too many other things in play, not taking really any other medication typically. These are patients who might be taking 18 different meds a day and who might have, 7 different clinical conditions, some of which are chronic, some of which are, I currently have the flu, or I've got gout, or I have eczema. And so companies, pharmaceutical companies, research institutions, governments will be able to mine that data. And it's a very rich data set and very unique, and that will be very valuable. So we'll be able to monetize that data by essentially licensing different slices of data, depending on the audience, to these potential clients. And I expect that the database itself, the anonymized, de-identified data, will become one of our largest assets by the end of next year, 2023.
Great. I think we're running up against the end of the clock here, but anything else you want to say before we end the discussion?
No, just, I think there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of tailwinds for the company right now, and we're seeing tremendous market pull. So I think this is a really good time to get involved in the Reliq story. I think we're at an inflection point and we'll see significant growth going forward. So we welcome any investors' interest and look forward to continuing to deliver.
Great, Lisa, thank you very much for your time today. We greatly appreciate it. Again, to anyone out there that's not already signed up for a one-on-one, again, please send me an email at lowensteiner@lythampartners.com or visit www.lythampartners.com/virtual and click the one-on-one meeting request button. Thank you very much again, Lisa, and everybody enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks for having us. Thanks.